Okay, so as promised, here is part 2 of my rotation recap video for my surgery clerkship. If you missed part 1, you can go back and see it in my rotation recap list, and I'll also try to put it up here somewhere on the screen so that you can just go straight to that video. But yeah, here's part 2. So we all know the stereotypical reputation that surgery gets. You know, you hear that there's going to be a lot of yelling and cursing and surgeons throwing things across the OR and people being upset with each other, and you might go home crying and getting pimped on all these really hard questions. And I'm not going to say that won't happen. But I think it really comes down to the people that you work with. The people that you are working with really can make or break the rotation in any specialty that you're in. For example, my neurosurgery rotation, I absolutely loved it. It could have been longer than just that short week that I had for the elective. Everyone there was very nice. I think there's this bad rep that neurosurgeons get that they're going to be like mean and have a God complex. But I think the people that I worked with were very eager to teach, and I remember one of the surgeons like taking me into the other ORs to like introduce me to the other neurosurgeons so that they knew who I was beforehand, and even like introducing me to members of the team like on name basis, and I like no one had to do that, and I just think that the people there were very welcoming. And even to the point where I got to like see this really cool high frequency ultrasound ablation for tremors, and I saw aneurysm repairs. I got to see some intraoperative monitoring with like neurologists working on deep brain stimulation and electrodes. It was all just very cool. You also do see a lot of ACDFs and lumbar laminectomies. A good part of neurosurgery, a good chunk of it is spine. I think a lot of people think of neurosurgery and they think, okay, someone's skull is going to be opened and they're going to be working on like the brain, but a good chunk of it was actually spine. And then trauma was super cool. So trauma surgery, for medical students, you get to gown up. You hear like the call overhead that a trauma is inbound, and they'll arrive on a stretcher, and everyone kind of gets to work. There's different roles that everyone is assigned to as they're standing around the bed. So medical students, you can also get gowned up. You often will get the shears so you can cut things off the patient, but you're also an extra set of eyes and hands to help examine, to move the patient, to grab blankets to keep them warm. And it's quite an interesting time. If you ever get that experience, I definitely recommend that you give that a try. I will say though that the types of situations that we saw was very eye-opening. There were a lot of motor vehicle accidents, and not just like motor vehicle, like car versus car. It was more so someone who was walking, a pedestrian, getting hit by a car, or someone on a scooter or a motorcycle. I would say motorcycles was probably the most common, and it definitely just makes you think about like the risks that you take. I firmly decided beforehand that I will never get on a motorcycle, or I had decided that I wouldn't beforehand, and now that was like set in stone. I will not ride on one of those because so many people came in, and it's just life-changing, the different injuries that incurred. So I definitely would say it was an eye-opening experience. I also got to have my first on-call time when I was there. They had some medical student call room in the trauma bay, so that was pretty neat, and I had a pager, felt really official. Some other things that you might hear about surgery: those OR lights are so hot, and I'm someone who gets cold really fast, so like if I'm telling you it was hot, it was hot. I remember one time I was wearing an N95, and then also the little surgical mask that has the face shield on top of that. I had a hairnet holding all my hair down, and then I was wearing lead, which it's like an apron, and it covers your neck too to protect your thyroid. And then I was wearing my scrubs underneath that, but also a surgical gown on top of that, and then my 2 pairs of gloves, and then the OR lights are beating down, and I had to hold this like guide wire, and I could not let go, because if I let go, then it was gonna like shoot into the person. So I remember thinking like all of this sweat is going down my face and onto the mask, because those lights are so hot, especially when you're nervous, like I was, like don't let go of the wire. So just be mindful of that. And I will say the gloves are hard to put on. Oh my God. Like bring an extra pair of gloves if you can, because I don't know what it is. I would scrub in and then I knew my hands were dry, but there's something about this motion. I just could not get my hands in there. And for the most part, I would luck out, but my heart was beating so fast beforehand. And it's like, this is not even the hard part of this. Like we haven't even begun, but the gloves themselves are just, it's like they're out to get us. It was so difficult. And also, do not touch the blue. Blue is the sterile field. You shouldn't be touching anything kind of like above your chest or below hand. You want to keep your hands close to you. Some people say keep them on you. Some people say hold them like this. I see more people who say keep them on you, because you don't want to touch anything like from your wrist down, and in this part of your chest, that's your sterile field. So you don't want to do anything that could cause you to contaminate yourself, and then now you have to go and get new gloves or scrub in again or something like that. And please don't touch the blue. Oh my God. There was one time where I walked into the OR from kind of like the inner chamber near their supply closet, and when I came into the room, I like reached in with my hand without looking to like turn on a light switch, and someone had put all of the sterile tools right there at the doorway uncovered, and I just walked in and almost put my hand over it, but I saw this nurse's face first, and she like looked at me in terror, and it like made me reflexively move my hand back, and I didn't even notice that the sterile field and all of the different tools are right there. So she saved me on that one. But yeah, don't touch the blue. The surgeons, the blue gowns, like nothing blue, just avoid it. Give it its amount of space that it needs. Don't lean over it. Don't breathe on it. Just stay away from the blue. The role of a medical student can really vary in surgery. You can go from being the first assist to just an observer. It really depends on the site that you're at and how much you want to make out of the experience. So to me, I don't think that there's a lot of benefit or learning from making the medical student be the camera person. I mean, maybe like in your first surgery, so that way you can see what's going on. But otherwise, there's really not much benefit. It's just grunt work. So try to make the most out of the experience that you can, like especially if you are gung-ho going into surgery, you know this is where you're meant to be. Read up about the procedures beforehand, know about the anatomy, know the steps, know the indications, know when not to do surgery, know about the different post-operative complications. Those are all very important, and it'll help you sparkle and shine on your rounds. Those are all very important, and it'll help you stand out on your rounds if you're trying to ask these people for letters of recommendation. Also, try to look for the things that aren't necessarily typically what you think of in surgery. Surgeons are not the only doctors in the room. There are anesthesiologists. There are going to be all sorts of different people involved in their care. So this was actually where I got to do my first ever successful intubation on a patient. And I remember at one point, like after the ET tube was inserted and the anesthesiologist was letting me bag them, and the anesthesiologist goes, "Wow, you see that? You're breathing for them." And I had like this little mini profound med student moment. I was very like proud of myself. And then I'm thinking like, oh God, can we make the machine do this now? Because like, what if I forget to squeeze? Like literally every time I was breathing, I was like pressing the bag, because I'm like, I need air. They probably need air, right? So I definitely will say that that was a good experience. So just try to make the most out of it that you possibly can. And one thing that I noticed about this environment is that you kind of have to assert yourself a little bit, ask for things to do, be enthusiastic. I didn't really notice people saying, oh, hey, do you want to do such and so? You kind of had to say, hi, I want to do that. And then the worst they can say is yes or is no. But I think if you show enthusiasm and a little bit of knowledge behind it, you'll get people to say yes more often than not. Okay, so now my embarrassing OR story. There was a patient, he was in like his late 50s, and he was living on a boat in the Keys. And while he was out in the water, he actually cut himself on his thigh. He didn't really think much of it, but after a while, it had become a lot more painful. And this was the backstory that we got from his wife, because she actually found him unresponsive. So he comes back, he was brought to our hospital. He had a leg as like hard as a rock, really just like there was a concern for compartment syndrome, and he was actually in septic shock. So after he was a little bit more stable, antibiotics were started, and he needed to have that nasty leg infection washed out. So it was me and 2 other medical students, a couple, like a resident and attending and everything, all washing out this leg wound. So we were taking turns trying to like retract and hold the leg in place. It was just a whole lot going on. So after the surgery, I had decided that I was going to be as helpful as I could. So I was asking, like, what does anyone need? I was helping move the patient, all this stuff. And then the anesthesiologist, she goes, oh, hey, can you get one of the manual pressure cuffs? Because we don't have one in this room. He was receiving a blood transfusion, and it was hanging on the IV pole, this unit of blood, and we needed it to go faster before we could move him out of the OR and into the PACU. So I got a blood pressure cuff that was available, and I slipped it up around the unit of blood, and the anesthesiologist kind of showed me like what I was supposed to do, and she was like, squeeze this bulb until the indicator light goes off. So I'm squeezing the bulb, and I'm like, wow, this pressure cuff is getting kind of tight here. And there's no indicator light going off. And like, as I'm thinking that, she and we made eye contact, and she was like, I think it's good for you to stop pressing. And I'm like, yeah, I think so too. And then I let go of the pressure cuff, and the bag of blood hits the IV pole. It's not in my hands at this point, but it hits the IV pole and then explodes. And now the OR is covered in blood. And I was just standing there like mortified, literally like this. And my hands are covered in blood. Everything is covered in blood. The anesthesiologist was covered in blood. I felt so bad. And the patient was covered in blood. The bear hugger was covered in blood, like everything. And I was like, how in the world did I do this? What just happened? And she asked, oh my God, what happened? And I'm like, I don't know. And I look at the end of the bed, and there are the other 2 medical students who were rotating with me. And I can see this look on their face like, oh, thank God that wasn't me. So it was a whole mess. Everything got cleaned up, but at the time I'm like, I don't even know how to properly help y'all, but I want to help y'all. And I like went over to the little scrub sink to wash all of this blood off of my arms, because I was like drenched on my arms. Didn't really get too much on my scrubs, but I did go change. So that was just like super embarrassing. I think there is such a thing as being too helpful, but I will say that no one was mad at me or anything. The anesthesiologist actually goes, oh my gosh, you were so helpful. You were just trying to do your part. I'm not mad at you at all. You were just trying to be helpful. We just need to write up an incident report on this thing, because that bag must have been faulty. Because it was crazy. But definitely one of the most embarrassing things that happened to me. I just remember standing there and I'm like, oh my word. Plus the patient is supposed to be getting a transfusion. Like, he needs this blood. It doesn't need to be on the floor right now. So yeah, definitely embarrassing. And I will say, if something feels wrong to you, go with that. You're not always gonna have the machine tell you that the blood pressure cuff is too tight, but I saw it with my own eyes and I was like, maybe I should stop. So if you get that vibe, stop. I'm gonna end this video with a couple of takeaways from things that I learned in my surgery experience. So, number one, you will get very good at washing your hands. Never have I ever been as clean as when I finished a surgical scrub. Also, hospital scrubs are definitely just as comfortable as everyone says. Communication is so key to your team running smoothly, and having good communication will decrease the amount of errors that could lead to patient harm or near misses. I'd also say that medical dramas and like different TV shows kind of paint a picture that's not exactly accurate of surgery. Like the scrub tech doesn't even get a name on a show, but they are so vital to making sure that your team runs smoothly. Also, machines and tools can fail, and especially as surgery is becoming more mechanized, you want to make sure that you have a contingency plan, a backup, so that in case something goes wrong, you're able to kind of circumvent that. And you don't end up, relying on a tool and then suddenly your OR is covered in blood like this med student did. So just be aware of that. And then also remember that your anesthesiologist and your CRNA are literally keeping your patient alive. But at the end of the day, the most important person in that operating room is your patient. That's all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to check out my other videos so that you can see more about the medical student experience, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.